Everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the Behemoth Sprite Stacking Game Engine tutorial series. In this first tutorial, we're going to talk about the scene editor. The scene editor is the tool that you're going to be spending most of your time working with. It's the screen that you're going to be using to create the maps for your game. To start off, I think it's very important to first understand what a scene is before we delve into what the scene editor does. A scene is nothing more than a canvas that you put game objects on. So stuff such as mapping objects, in our case for instance a house, sounds, scripts, NPCs, all these things you're going to be placing in your game by using the scene editor. You're going to be using different scenes for different areas in your game. So for instance, if you were to create a town RPG game, you would have a scene for your town, so the streets, the houses, all this stuff are going to be one scene, and then the interior of, for instance, the town hall would be another scene. So you would have stuff such as walls, the floor, NPCs that are inside the building, and you're going to be switching between the two. Right, so now we have a good understanding of what the scene editor is. Let's look at the panels that compose the scene editor and learn how to use each one of them. First of all, we have the hierarchy tab. And what the hierarchy tab is, it's a tool that you can use to keep track of the objects inside your scene. So for instance, I organized everything here neatly into subfolders. You can add the subfolder by clicking a parent and clicking this button right here. And we can get a new folder. To rename it, you can rename it from here. Right, so let's delve into it. If we go to any of these folders and expand it, you can see a bunch of objects in here. These are the objects that actually make up my map. So if I were to click this one, for instance, it would just guide me to the object itself. Right, so now we have a pretty good understanding of what the hierarchy does. Just as a side tangent, you can also change stuff regarding pertaining to the current scene, which is right here. You can click it and change stuff such as the ambient light or the background of the scene. And you can also change properties about the project itself, so your game. Right, so now that we have that covered, let's look at the Inspector tab. The Inspector tab allows you to modify different properties of your game objects. They let you change their position, their scale, their rotation, elevation, and these are some of the few properties that are more common across the game objects. But each different type of entity, so sounds, mapping object, particles, all these things, have their own special types of properties that you can change. By clicking on the entity itself, an entity is just an object, you can see some of the default properties, some of the basic things you're going to see all across the board, as well as some tools in here. They're pretty self-explanatory, you can figure them out quite easily, but I might make a tutorial in the future. Or you can get into more detailed properties by expanding this arrow right here, this plus icon. And by clicking it, you can get a view over the different properties of each object. And if we click them, we can see more in-depth information about each object that we can change. Cool. So now we have a pretty good idea of what the inspector does, and I believe that the only tab that's left to explore is the asset tab. The asset tab is the one right here, and it's the one we're going to be using to explore the assets in our game. So if we want, for instance, to add a new object to the scene, it's pretty straightforward. We can just access it from here. For instance, let's just take a rock, and we can drop it right here. And that's it, pretty straightforward. You can do the same thing for sounds, for NPCs, particle effects, lights, all this stuff. You can access different types of game objects by simply clicking on the section that represents it. Then I think that the only two things that are slightly different are the navigation tab and the scenes tab. The scenes tab is pretty straightforward, it just allows you to create new scenes. So if I were to create a new scene, I'll just go ahead and say scene 2. And the navigation tab is the one that's more special out of the bunch, if you will, and it lets you create the colliders for your map. So the way this works, the way you tell the game which places in your map can be walked over and which cannot, all you have to do is go to the navigation tab and you're going to see this green grid. when you click any of the tiles in the grid, it's gonna turn red. As soon as the tile turns red, it means that NPCs or objects cannot walk or go past it. This also means that lights are going to be blocked by these tiles, and you're gonna get a cast shadow. If you click on a red tile again, it's gonna get unblocked. Right, so that covers the basics of what each pane does. And to end this tutorial, let's look over a few shortcuts that are gonna make your life easier, so you can make your maps faster. Right, so when you select an asset, and this works for a bunch of different assets, not only for mapping, it works for objects, for lights, particles. Just explore and check out which entities support this. Let's say we select a rock. If you were to hold down Ctrl and scroll up or down, you can see the objects zooming in and out, scaling up and down. If you were to hold down Shift and scroll up or down, we would rotate it. Now, when we press click and place it on the map, we still have access to a few shortcuts. If we are to press any of the directional keys, any of the arrow keys, we can move the object around. If we are to hold Ctrl while pressing either the up or down arrows, we can scale the object up or down. If we are going to press Ctrl and hold it down while pressing the left or right arrows, we can rotate it. If we're pressing Shift and keep pressing it while pressing the up or down arrow keys, we can either increase or decrease the elevation of the object. Finally, the last shortcut you're going to be using is Ctrl C, which, pretty self-explanatory, is going to clone the object. And that's pretty much it. This should cover most of the things you're going to be using while using the scene editor. Right, I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.